So why don't we get started? I'm Bob Hinden. I'm very pleased to have been asked to come and speak here today. I got to, it's just sort of a long road for me. I had it's a mixture of seeing the potential and being in the right place at the right time. I worked for BBN when BBN was building the ARPANET, and got to work with Vint as he was the program manager. And got to work on some of the early internet stuff. And we at BBN, or at least the little group I had, we built what was essentially the first operational routers. And we also had the contract to actually operate the internet. So I was maybe the first or one of the first internet operators. And it's been really a wonderful. For me, personally, it's been really wonderful to have had the opportunity to sort of work on the beginning of the internet and continue through a number of companies and standards and stuff to get to where we are here. And once when I first heard that Vint was going to Google, I think I sent you sort of like every 6 months an email which says, "So what's Google doing with IPv6?" And so here we are. So this is really quite good. So I'm going to see if I can work this. There we go. So I'm going to talk today about, do a little introduction, why I think this is important. Then sort of with my Nokia hat on, talk about why I think it's especially important for mobile devices, ones with batteries. Do a very brief overview of Nokia support for V6, and then some thoughts on V6 and Google, and it's a little. I realize not living here, it's a little presumptuous of me to suggest what you might do, but I've been in the Valley since '92, and it's been sort of interesting to see Google be founded and see more and more of these buildings, around here start to have Google signs on them. So, seeing you from the outside, I use your stuff quite a lot, and I like apps that you've built for our devices, like Google Maps, that I think work quite well. So there's clearly a lot of collaboration going on. So. As several of the previous speakers have said, it's really a question of when V6 is going to happen, not or when addresses are going to run out. 6 years ago, it was projections were much further out, and a set of events that I don't think anyone is completely clear on, but the allocation rates really have gone up, and we're approaching zero. And V4 address exhaustion was the main reason that V6 was first, the activity in the IETF to develop V6 started. It clearly took longer than we expected. CIDR helped a lot in the short term because the Class Bs were running up very quickly, and then I think NATs have prolonged it even more. But now we're seeing the time we got by doing those things, I think, has clearly run out. And if NATs by themselves could completely solve this, then, we wouldn't be seeing the V4 addresses continue to be used. And so I think it's really time for everyone involved for action. It's time for debating it, whether it's the right protocol. It's clearly not perfect. I think Steve Deering and I were the chairs and authors of some of the core RFCs, and I don't think either of us would say that it came out the way we would have liked. The IETF is a big consensus organization, and I have my own list, which I won't share with you today, of the way I think it would have been better. But that's sort of pointless. That's back in the past. We all have ways we think it could have been better, but we have it today, and it does work, and we should deploy it. So. I guess the other thing to talk about here is, so what happens if we don't do this? And we're clearly going to get multiple layers of NATs. And there's, I think we're going to basically lose the architectural principles that made the internet possible. I'm not just, this is sometimes talked to about the end-to-end model, but I actually, the internet got designed for sort of, this architecture that was pushed by ARPA, which in theory was for military usage. But I actually think that the properties of IPv4, or the datagram protocol, actually made possible to build a commercial internet. I'm not sure that we were thinking, I mean, at least I wasn't thinking about that. Maybe Vint was. Right. So, but I think a lot of the properties of the architecture made it possible, made it easy to connect. It wasn't like the phone network that required lots of central coordination. And so the worry about losing this architecture is that we're going to an architecture that doesn't scale and go the same way as what we have now. And it's sort of, it's a more subtle thing. There's, it's easy to do the Band-Aids, but it's, I don't think we wouldn't have gotten what we have today, and I don't know where it will go. It's going to be a lot nastier. The other thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a market for public v4 addresses, and this is probably starting to happen a little bit today. But this is going to clearly be we'd end up in a world where people with money have addresses and people without money won't. And I worry that that's, it'll be a free market of addresses, but I worry that that's going to clearly cause regulation, because it's going to be a world that's clearly, excludes large parts of the world, and there's a lot of political power that won't accept that. And I prefer not to live in an internet that, no disrespect to anyone from ICANN, but if you think ICANN is bad, wait till the UN gets it. So, I think we're much better. I think that the innovation we can do by having it not be regulated is much better. And I guess the other way to look at this is, if we don't do v6, if we don't keep this internet datagram protocol going the way it was envisioned, I think we'll largely have, eaten the goose that laid the golden egg. The internet has been this wonderful mechanism for wealth creation and innovation and communication between people. And, there's a lot of short-term activity that goes on because I only want to solve my local problem, but I think it's time we all step back and solve the global problem. So I'll go into why this is important for mobile devices. There's going to be, projected to be over 3 billion cell phones, by the end of this year. There's a real push in a lot of these devices for always-on applications, ones that want to keep connections up. And to do this, you really end up with a choice between v4 with NAT with frequent keep alives or v6 and long-lived connections. So I believe that, and a lot of my colleagues at Nokia believe that v6 is actually really important to help save battery life. And if you're building devices without power cords, this is really important. And a lot of the usability is how long the device stays on. And the problem we have today is that if you're using v4, they're behind NATs. The always-on applications are always used doing keep alives. And the trouble is, so different NATs have different time periods to timing out the state, and it ranges from 40 seconds to 5 minutes. We've actually done some measurement of this. The trouble is you don't know what NATs you're behind, so you have to always shoot for the minimum. So you end up with about a 30-second keep alive period. And that basically runs down the battery. The thing you learn fairly early when you're doing networking on mobile devices is that using the transmitter is expensive. Well, turning on the radio is expensive, but it's cheaper to receive than to transmit. And so having to wake up and send a keep alive is expensive, especially if there's no data being transferred. So it's, you can do the one every 30 seconds, 3 billion phones. That's a lot of packets. And this happens because there's state in the middle of the NAT. You can read the slides. It needs to be refreshed, and it's really better to avoid this. But to make this worse, there's starting to be lots of applications that do this, and they're not, all the applications want to do this themselves because they don't know what else is running. There's not a central, it's not like it's happening at the IP layer in the device, so different applications are all doing this, so you sort of get you get a multiplication factor here, so it gets even worse. Let's see. There we go. So, So we think there's sort of from a mobile device point of view, there's really a key. The battery life thing is reason enough to do this. Plus, all the other issues, just like having stable addresses. But just to keep the battery life and the phones from having to be recharged frequently is a real win. So we have implementations of V6 in a whole range of our devices. We got at this fairly early. Some of the pictures up here you can't buy anymore. Some are new, some are old. This is newer. The Symbian OS that most of our devices run, has V4 and V6. I think we actually wrote the original V6 implementation and gave it back to Symbian. And then we have, application support on this. While we have been fairly active, clearly the market for V6 has been slow, and I think we need to do a lot more to make sure all of our new applications work with V6, that they work with V6 only. There's a bunch of other things. We have it in the stack, but we need to do more to make it work seamlessly. We have done some applications that work V6 only. We did a mobile TV application on the N92 that worked quite well with V6. We also have a security group, a group that builds security products over in Mountain View. That's actually where I work, and we've had V6 in those products for a long time. They may be the first commercial V6 security products. I think that one main point here is that why this is important even for people who aren't running V6 is the bad guys have actually discovered V6 as a nice covert channel, and because a lot of commercial security devices see V6 and don't look at what's in it, they use it as a back channel. So you may not be using V6 as a service, but somebody else might be using it on your network, and it's maybe a nice mechanism to control bots. It's the guys who do this are really good early adopters. Right. It's the good and the bad news. It's I guess there's been spam now with V6, and so is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing for V6, but for everything else, it's about the same. I wonder if there'll be more spam or less spam with V6. I think it'll be the same. So I had a few thoughts about V6 and Google. I apologize in advance. These are things you have to decide, but there's some, from the standing on the outside of this, I've been involved in V6 since the beginning and have some view for how well this is going. I think all of us working on it have slightly different views. Randy has one view. We agree on a lot of things, don't agree on everything. And so, I have some views of what I think is important. So, I guess the first question is why would Google be interested in this? It's like, Google is doing pretty well. I think your stock is doing well. You're building lots of cool applications that work over the network. The V4 internet seems to work. Why would you bother doing this? I guess the thing that always comes up in commercial companies is what's the business case for this? We want to solve our problems and our customers' problems, not everybody else's problems. This was so much easier when we did the NCP TCP transition, where there was one organization in charge, and we could actually turn the old one off and had a transition day and a couple test days, and that's not the internet we live in, though it would make this easier. But so, I think one idea here is that V6 will make connections to your customers better, and I think, if we end up with the world of multiple layers of net, it's not clear there's going to be one internet. It's not clear everyone connected to it will actually have access to services everywhere else. It's going to be really messy and separate. And so it's going to be harder for you to talk to your customers. So if you think about V6, it's sort of, V6 will enable, stable bindings with, say, 6 billion future Google customers, always-on customers. It's going to be really hard to do that with V4. It's just going to get very messy. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's just going to be messy and expensive, and you're going to have to deploy way more infrastructure and servers to do this. I've heard, read stuff about Google getting involved in mobile devices. And, I've seen that you've bid on the 700 megahertz spectrum. And so the problems we've noticed at Nokia about battery life will be ones that you will also have to deal with. And I assume you have the vision of, supporting lots and lots of mobile wireless users. And, the V6 is a much better platform for that. I think you can build new applications that enable, take advantage of the features that V6 provides. It sort of restores this end-to-end model. And the other thing, which I was thinking about last night when I was finishing up these slides, is we've gotten to the world where everything is going through an intermediary, or if you're doing IM, your packets are probably going through an IM server somewhere, and these, if you have connectivity between the two endpoints directly, you can use the server to do the rendezvous, but the actual packets can then go directly. And again, I'm wildly speculating here, but I read about you guys building really large hosting centers, in places where there's bandwidth and lots of cheap electricity. And my guess is that, even with your resources, you're going to find this gets to be hard to scale. So if you can move some of these applications to ones where all the traffic isn't going through the servers, but can go directly between the endpoints, I think that's going to be a win. And the scaling of your server deployment will be better. And, sort of a lead into this. I mean, I think you may find that there is significant advantage in using V6 internally. I say move away from V4 addressing constraints. So I remember what V4 was like when we, first used it, and addresses were plentiful and so forth. And now we have this world where it's just the story of putting the frog in the water, in the pot of water, and you turn, if you drop it in the boiling water, it jumps out, and if you heat it up slowly, it cooks. Well, the V4 world, in some sense, we've been cooking for a long time. We've gotten used to the added complexity. The notion that you're limited by the number of host addresses on your subnet. This is an idea that, people have just gotten sort of used to. They've gotten used to very careful management of address allocation. So much that some people think it's the only way to do it. And I think there's a lot of things that we've gotten used to in the V4 world that don't have to be that way. They're actually expensive and complicated. Corporations trying to do secure, VPNs from one net 10 space to another net 10 space somewhere else. This is really hard stuff to get working and debug when it doesn't work. So we've moved, the water is a lot hotter than it used to be, and we've sort of gotten used to it, but, this does give us a chance to fix some of these things. And so I think, if you can get to a V6 only internal architecture for your users, internal users, and your, I assume, content distribution in your servers, I think you may end up finding that it's actually a lot simpler and cheaper. And so some specific things that I think Google can do, is start providing some public content over V6. we're doing, in the v6 deployment, we're doing pretty well in a bunch of areas. It's in a lot of operating systems. It's in a lot of routers. All these things need to get better. It's in it's in a range of things. But what there's the real lack of is content. In some sense, the only real v6 content is the dancing Kame turtle. That's how v6 is working. I can see the turtle dance. But there's not a lot else. And so I believe you guys have a lot of content. So clearly something you can do here. So I think this would be very helpful to do. Obviously, I'm not recommending that you make www.google.com have quad A records, because I think there's going to be a lot of devices out there that get lower service. But I think you can probably come up with some things that you can do that don't break it for the general user, but do make it accessible. I think you can look into building new applications that take advantage of the v6 end-to-end properties. Could clearly do some sort of high-quality video conferencing where the direct connections are very important. You clearly don't want to go through a server. I think there's a lot of things in the presence, collaboration, user-to-user space that might be very interesting. If you were to offer some v6 versions of existing applications and services, I think it would help generate IPv6 demand. And essentially, especially if it was something you couldn't get to with v4, if you did something special for v6, it would actually provide a carrot to users. It would encourage people to connect, to have v6 so they could get to this content or services. I mean, so far, I think there's been a little back connection about people thinking about offering free porn, but I'm not going to put that on my slides. Though that, it's one of the internet secrets is like, so what really generated all that traffic? But I hope that's not the thing that drives v6, but I'll take it if we have it. But I think you can probably think of some things that you're doing that you could make accessible with v6 that would allow, encourage users to actually want to get v6 service, make sure it's working on their devices. Not in a way that breaks stuff, but just, for the people who are interested, they'll be more motivated. Because right now, the dancing turtle isn't enough, though it's a wonderful dancing turtle. So just in summary, v4 addresses are going to be exhausted soon. It's not really when that matters now, but it's soon enough that we have to do something about. And it's, soon, there's still time to make this not completely crazy. But if we wait too much longer, it's going to get much harder, I think. v6 is really important for mobile devices with always-on services, the things you have to do to work around NATs, and it just boggles my mind to think about if I have multiple layers of NATs, how I deal with and how you build applications that work in those environments reliably in ways that provide good communication. And the reason I was excited to come here is I think Google can have a very important role in building the IPv6 internet. So thank you.